Hello everybody, this is Connor at BoatsDon'tSink here with another deck profile for you guys. Last time we talked about 8 Choice Fate Grand Order. This time I have another Fate Grand Order deck profile for you. This one is 8 Treasure, focusing on the Pharaoh trait. So before we go into anything else, let's take a look at the deck list itself. And I want to preface this with, this is not a competitive deck. Anyone looking at this list right now is going to think, oh goodness, this is, pretty casual deck. But it is an interesting concept to me behind this deck with all of the interactions it has. And as I said with the last one, I want these decks to be good starting points for new players or old players that are new to this set to be able to look at what the set has as options and sort of build off of that. So I've chosen to go with this 8 Treasure Pharaoh trait deck. It is sort of the, maybe not pushed deck, but the build-around deck for green in the Camelot set. And we have the deck log code in the bottom corner as well, if you'd like to take a look at the deck on deck log. Now, our Climax Combos for this deck, we're playing, as I said, 8 Treasure. We're playing the level 1 as a Pharaoh Nitocris. And we're playing the level 3, the Sun King Ozymandias. The Nitocris is interesting because it's not actually a card advantage combo, it's just generating resources for us. The Ozymandias is a little bit of a build around, but I think with the cards we have, we can make that work. So taking a closer look at the Nitocris combo, Continuous, if all of your characters are green or Chaldea, this card gets plus 1000 power and Twin Drive. You can pay 1 on attack to trigger check 2 times. And then the Climax combo is just on attack. If the Climax is in play, you can choose a green or Chaldea character in your waiting room and put it into your stock. So we're generating 1 stock off of each copy of this combo, and potentially twin driving to get a lot of trigger checks. Now, the reason we like this combo in this deck is because of our level 0 Ancient Queen of the Heavens Nitocris, which has a 1 stock effect that's going to let us plus hand. So we can convert all of this stock from our level 1 combo into actual hand, and hopefully between trigger checking plussing climaxes and getting all this stock, we can keep a full hand while also building a lot of resources. Our other level 0, Rescue of the World Ozymandias, has an effect that's going to let us filter out treasures that we trigger and turn them into other cards, so having Twin Drive in an 8 treasure deck is not really as big of a downside, because we can just turn all those treasures into playables almost immediately. And we'll take a closer look at both of those cards in a little bit. Our other Climax combo is the Sun King Ozymandias. So this is a 3/2 9k. If there's a face-up marker underneath him, he gets 6000 power, making him 15k. During the turn that he's placed on the stage from hand at the beginning of the Encore step, you can put the top card of your clock into your waiting room. So it's a bit of a delayed heal, but a heal nonetheless. It's designed this way to interact with an alarm that we've got. And then his Climax combo is when he reverses his battle opponent, you can pay 2, discard 2 to clock kick that character, and then deal 2 damage to your opponent, which is actually a reasonable amount of damage output. That means you're swinging, I mean, you're probably not doing 3 of these, but if you do 2 copies, you've got 3/2, 3/2, 3, and 2 guaranteed instances in there. So if you stick an attack and a burn, and then your 2 clock kicks, like that's 7 damage, so you kill from 3/0. So I think this is actually a pretty potent finisher with a cost that you should be able to do 2 of, I think. The hand might be a little bit of a problem, but as long as you can go into your last turn with a good bit of hand, this should be feasible. Now, the way to get a marker under this guy, we have a 2/1, the God King Ozymandias. This has an alarm and a bunch of other text, but the way he goes under him as a marker is just act. You send him from stand to your waiting room to just put him underneath the Ozymandias 3/2 as a marker. And that's going to be an extra 6000 power. This is actually not really required. That does actually make your resource cost on final turn a lot higher. So I don't think the 6k is really mandatory for this deck, but there are some matchups where you're going to need that power to get over something, so we have the option nonetheless. And I do want to talk about, there is another treasure combo if you just wanted to play 8 treasure. but this one is not Pharaoh trait, so it's not going to interact with some of the other cards that we're using, and it doesn't generate stock, which is sort of what I built this deck around, making stock and then converting that into cards. This is more of a traditional level 1 combo where you're going to just plus actual hand. So if you want to play that, go for it. I've just chosen to focus more on the Pharaoh trait in this deck specifically. So as I've said, we're using our stock to generate card advantage so that we can keep playables every turn. So what cards do we have that are going to allow us to do that? Well, as we mentioned, Ancient Queen of the Heavens, Nudicrous. This is a 0/0 with Act, pay 1, put a Climax from your hand into your waiting room, choose a character in your waiting room, return it to your hand. This isn't card advantage, but it is a way to turn our treasures, which are card advantage, and if we trigger them, and cards that we probably don't want a lot of in our hand. It's a way to turn those into playables. And it has Act, Resonate, pay 1, reveal the Sun King Ozymandias in your hand, and rest this card. Look at up to 3 cards from the top of your deck, choose a Chaldea or Camelot character from among them, reveal it, put it in hand, put the rest into your waiting room. So this turns 1 stock into a card off of the top 3 of our deck, as long as we're holding a copy of the Sun King in our hand. Which shouldn't be too difficult. We're playing 4 copies of it. We have this pay 1, ditch a Climax salvage. We have a couple of other ways to search for it. So we should be able to get an Ozymandias fairly early in order to start using this Nudicrous effect. And this is just going to let us get a card for a stock every turn. And there will probably be times where you end up with 2 of these in your back row, and that's just 2 stock to get 2 cards. And as long as you're generating stock through other means, you're still going to have plenty of resources to work with. And as we show, we have the level 1 combo that's generating stock and the 2/1, which this 2/1's first effect is Alarm, beginning of your Climax phase if it's the top card of your deck, or top card of your clock, sorry, and you have 4 or more green or Chaldea characters, you may put the top card of your deck into your stock. So that is a blind stock, and it is at the bottom of what you've triggered that turn, which is a little unfortunate, but it's a free stock just by clocking this 2/1. So part of what we're going to be doing is trying to get these 2/1s into the top of our clock as often as possible. And we actually have a kind of cool way to do that as well. Taking a look at the 2/1s full text, we've talked about 2 of its effects. The third one is just rest it, give a green or Chaldea character 3000 power. As I said, we're playing 4 of this card because we just want to get it on top of our clock every turn. It is a stock, which isn't exactly card advantage, but it is something that we have a lot of ways to make card advantage out of. And our other form of card advantage is Rescue of the World Ozymandias, who we mentioned for his ability to filter out treasure climaxes. But he also has Continuous. All of your other Pharaoh characters get Encore. Put the top card of your deck into your clock. If you're familiar with the regular Fate Stay Night deck, you'll know that they've played a Shiro with a similar effect quite often to allow them just to play out whatever 0s and 1s they want, and they can just clock themselves to keep them around as a free +1. I don't like this effect a whole lot. I think it can put you in kind of rough situations if you don't cancel and then still also have to clock yourself to keep your cards around. But in the situation where we play out, say, our level 1 combo, and we attack with it and make stock, if we trigger another copy of its Climax so that we can combo again the following turn, clock encoring our level 1 combos might be a pretty good play just to generate even more resources for free. That's a +1 for each one that we save, and we're generating another stock off of it when we combo next turn. So I think that's pretty good, and this one has a relevant second effect. Shiro was basically just a blank other than his clock encore. This one has an effect that we kind of want in our back row anyway in order to filter out treasures that we trigger, especially with our twin drivers. Looking at the hand filter side of things, because as I said, we're 8 treasure. They're going to clog our hand if we trigger them. We've already taken a look at 2 cards, the Nudicrous and Ozymandias back rows, that are going to be able to filter out climaxes. But we actually have a few other ways to filter out anything in our hand, or climaxes as well. So taking a look at those, we have Influence of the Mage Queen Nudicrous. On play, put a climax from your hand into your waiting room. To choose a Chaldea or Camelot character in waiting room, return it to hand. So this is similar to the Nudicrous back row effect, except instead of act ability pay 1 ditch a climax, it's just on play ditch a climax. So this can save us a stock. Which, you know, it's not, I mean, it's literally basically exactly the same effect, just on play instead of act, but for less stock. So this is really only going to come up when you're playing this Nitocris from hand anyway. You're not going out of your way to get this hand fix. But it also has, when this becomes reversed in battle, reveal top card of your deck. If that card is level 2 or higher, you may return this to your hand. This is just a +1. We need a little bit of card advantage here and there. So a couple copies of this as a card that we can potentially field and then bounce back to hand as a plus. And it also has utility stapled on it. It's just something I thought that we might want a couple copies of. Our next card, King Among Kings Ozymandias, has on play from hand, discard 1 card, doesn't have to be a Climax, to choose the Sun King's Holy Grail in your waiting room and return it to your hand. That is an event card that we're playing. And he also has, when your other Chaldea or Camelot character becomes reversed in battle, if this card is in your backstage, you may pay the cost if you do rest that character. A little awkward because we have a lot of back row cards, so fitting this guy in your back row might not be the easiest thing in the world. But once you're past the point that you want to clock yourself for Clock Encore all the time, it might be worth, say, pushing that card up, putting Ozymandias in your backstage, and if anything gets reversed that you would rather keep on board, say you've put an early play down or something like that, you can just sack the Ozymandias to keep it safe. And by that point, you might have another copy of the Clock Encore to put in back row or some other back row that you want instead. But we're honestly mainly playing this card for the bond effect to the event. Since we're playing two of this Ozymandias and 2 copies of the event, it's going to give us some pretty cool access to a card that I think is unique enough to play in this deck. And our last form of hand fix is Confrontation against the Strong, Xuanzang Sanzang. We looked at this card a lot in the 8 choice deck. It's on play from hand, pay 1, discard 1, search your deck for a Chaldea or Camelot character. So this actually gives us deck access, whereas most of everything else we've had is either waiting room or just looking at cards off the top of our deck. And it also has on play from hand, shuffle 2 characters from your waiting room back into your deck. It gains, or it can't decrease soul by side attacking until end of turn. You don't have as many cool interactions with that effect in this deck as you do in the Lion King deck, but I think this is still worth having as a drop search to give us our only form of deck access. And again, this also isn't a Pharaoh trait card, so you have to be careful. You can't Clock Encore this. But this really is just there for deck access in a deck that doesn't really have other ways to get to it. Now, taking a look at the other cards that we're playing, we have Provocative Gaze Nitocris. During your turn, if you have another Chaldea or Camelot character, this gets 3,000 power, and on attack, pay 1, trigger check 2 times. I like this as a 4K just to have some way to answer opposing like 3,500s and 4,000 power level 0s early in the game. Especially since we can Clock Encore this. We can run over our opponent's oversize, and then when Nitocris gets reversed, we can just Clock Encore it and do it again. And Twin Drive is going to let us trigger check those treasures, which we can then, filter out with our back row, the Clock Encore giver, to turn them into other playable cards. So it's basically just pay 1, get an extra chance at plussing 1 hand, which I think is pretty good. I think that's a pretty solid way to, churn through your deck. And it's also, having Twin Drive is kind of nice with the alarm, since we are blind stocking going into our Climax phase. You can attack with one of these first to just pay out your blind stock if you're worried that you might be blind stocking at Climax. So yeah, I like this Twin Driver overall. Just as a couple copies. It's not something we want to rely too heavily on, but it's a good card to open with. Pharaohs Divine Authority Ozymandias is our ideal just turn 1 opener. During opponent's turn, if all your characters are Chaldea or Camelot, which they always will be, this gets +1 level and plus 1,500 power, so he's a level 1 4,000. Level 1 means he can't be removed by level 0 bombs, and 4,000 power is just a high stat line, so he's a card that we can pretty reliably put on the board, and it's going to survive a turn cycle, which is a +1, and we want those in this deck. We really do. 1 copy of Magnanimous Like the Sun Ozymandias. This is just an anti-change clock bomb. We're playing 1 copy just to have answers to any problematic early plays our opponents might have. As I said with the Mordred in the last deck, I don't want to tech these decks out too hard, but in the current meta, having some form of anti-change is just almost mandatory in every deck because of how many decks have access to strong early play profiles. So we've got our 1 copy here. and that's about it. We have Whereabouts of the Holy Grail, Romani Archiman. This is a backup that we also played in the 8-choice deck. It's just an anti-change backup. Pay 2, discard a Chaldea or Camelot character to bottom deck one of your opponent's characters with a higher level than your opponent's level. We don't have as much that's important to backup in this deck, so this is the only backup we're playing. But you can use it to protect early play healers, which is fine, or just to mess up your opponents if they, attack in the wrong order or field multiple early plays, and there's something you need to get rid of. Bottom decking is especially nice because we can get rid of early plays with Encore, such as Rusha from Hololive. So, this is a card I like having just one copy of as our one backup. If the anti-change isn't super valuable to you, or you want to stay on theme with all Pharaoh cards, there is an Ozymandias backup. There's also the Gawain 3500 backup. Guardian of the Egyptian region, Nitocris. This is actually a rather important card to our deck. Continuous, if your level is 2 or higher, this gets the following ability. Pay 1, put 1 card from your hand into your waiting room, and rest this card. To choose the God King Ozymandias in your waiting room, put it on any position of your stage. This brings out the card that we need for our marker for our 3-2, for essentially the same cost as playing that 2-1 from our hand. So this allows us to more aggressively clock these Ozymandias 2-1s to get resources, and not have to worry about holding one in hand for our finisher, since we can just summon it off of this back row assist. It means we can prioritize getting the back row assist instead of holding Ozymandias, because you do want to clock the Ozymandias, I think, a fair amount of the time to get free stock. It's also a continuous assist. All of your level 3 or higher characters in front of this get plus 2,000 power. So that's going to make our early play healers at 12k. It's going to make our finishers 11k before Climax, 12k with. Which I think is a power line that there will be situations for sure that you can get a reverse with 12k without needing the extra, like, 6,000 from the marker. So we don't even always have to go for the markers, but say you're fielding 2 Ozymandias. If you can get the marker under one of them, and then the other one can reverse something smaller, you have a 12,000 lane and an 18,000 lane. I think that's pretty good. So yeah, just overall a pretty good card. Once you're beyond the point that you want to be clocking yourself as much, you can replace this in the back row over the clock encore support. As long as you have enough other ways to filter out treasures in your hand, at least. Next, we're looking at Compassionate Mage Queen Nitocris. This is our early play. Again, we're playing 4 copies of our early play just because it is the only other level 3 in green, similar to how Mordred was the only other level 3 in yellow. It's a 3/2 9k, -1 level if you have 4 or more Chaldea or Camelot characters, so super easy early play condition. Gets plus 500 power for each other Chaldea or Camelot character in your backstage, putting it at 10k if you have 2 backstage. And on play, heals the bottom card of your clock, meaning we can clock our alarm and not have to worry about healing it off on accident. Which is great. Both of our healers work around our alarm so that we can get enough resources to resolve our finisher without having to worry about, like, skipping healing. Overall, it's not super flashy card, but it is, I think, a good card to be playing. Just to get some heals at level 2 if you can cancel pretty well. Or just heal later in the game. And last we have the Sun King's Holy Grail. This is the event we're playing. It is bondable by our 0/0, the sort of like field encore card. It's 1/0, choose one of your opponent's level 1 or higher characters. Your opponent chooses a level X or lower character in their waiting room and exchanges them. X is equal to the level of the character you chose, -1. So if they have a level 2, they have to swap it with a 1 or lower. If they have a 3, they have to swap it with a 2 or lower, etc. This is a pretty powerful effect. If you've played against Data Live or Beaufry, or even Hololive at this point, you've probably seen some variation on this effect. It can be pretty obnoxious when you put down like these really important like level 2s or 3s that are providing power to your board, or just have like strong effects that you want them to survive. And then someone's just like, yeah, swap that with a lower level card in your waiting room. Can be pretty obnoxious, can mess up board states. And this is going to help our finisher also get reverses in the case where, you know, we might not be able to get the 18k power or whatever. We can level down one of our opponent's level 3s into a 2 that hopefully we can reverse easier with our Ozymandias finisher. And we have decent access to this event, even only playing 2 copies, since we do also have the Bonder to it that can get us the event out of the waiting room, as long as we can discard a card. Looking at some other options for the deck, if you want to make some changes, the first places that I would look to make those changes, we have where Justice is Sunzong. This is a 105k. When battle opponent becomes reversed, if there's a climax in your climax area, you may put the top card of your deck into your stock. We're playing 8 treasures, so we're probably going to be able to play a climax most turns, which makes this Sunzong almost always live. 5,000's a little bit small. It's going to be 6,000 with the climax, obviously. So maybe a little small to get reverses consistently, but it is just more stock. Though I do think it's possible to reach a point where you have too much stock and not enough ways to do things with it, but you know, that's maybe something to test. In addition, if you're playing that 1-0 Sunzong, we have Body Outside Body Sunzong. This is a 2-1 3k. On play from hand, you can rest one of your Stand, Chaldea, or Camelot characters. It can rest itself if you'd like. Search your deck for up to 2 Where Justice is Sunzong, which is the 1-0 we just looked at. Put them on separate positions of your stage and shuffle your deck. That is a, like, +2. You just play this card for 1 stock. It's still a card on board, and it just gets you 2 cards from deck for no cost, really. You can just rest the Clock Encore guy. He's not going to rest for anything else. And then when you play a Climax, you give a character 2,000 power, which can pump one of your Sunzongs up to like 8k, which is maybe a little more realistic to get a reverse. But yeah, this card's kind of cool. If you're playing the 1-0, you can play like 1 or 2 of this, and it's just free cards, basically. Helps you keep attackers in a deck where you're generating a lot of stock and not as much hand without converting it. This is just a way to, you know, turn 1 stock into two extra attackers, right? You can, as long as you have 1 of this Sunzong in hand, you can get 3 attacks, which is really cool. So maybe something to look at there. And the last option I would heavily consider for this deck, actually, is Night Before the Decisive Battle, Hassan of the Serenity. This is a card that we looked at in the last deck as well, and it's a very powerful card. And it has a lot of synergy with this deck as well. On play from hand, you can discard a card to reveal the top card of your deck, choose a level X or lower in your waiting room, return it to your hand. X is the level of the card you revealed. So this is more hand filter to help us get those treasures out of hand, but it can also discard any like high-level characters we don't want as well in order to salvage, which is going to let us just sort of like loop our level 1 combo, loop filter level 0s or whatever else we want. But it also has, when it goes from stage to waiting room, you can pay to salvage, which also gives us something to do with all of the stock that we're generating. So overall, I think this card actually has a lot of synergy, and this might be the first card I would consider adding to the deck over, say, the Ditch Climax Salvage Nidocris that like bounces back to hand. And maybe you could cut like 1 other card somewhere else to play 3 of this Hassan. I think that would be a pretty solid change to make to the deck. You just have to note as well, you can't Clock Encore this. That would be pretty amazing if you could like pay 2 to salvage and then also just Clock Encore it back to board. But unfortunately it's not Pharaoh trait, so you're not going to be able to do that. In conclusion, returning to the list that we looked at the beginning, so you can see all the cards together here. I think this deck's pretty cool. As I said, it's not a like super competitive deck, but I think it has a lot of fun interactions, a lot of ways to play around your board. It is kind of streamlined, actually, like in terms of your strategy. You just generate stock, turn it into cards, keep attacking, and then get to your finisher and hopefully like blow your opponent up. So it's not like a super complicated deck. If anyone looking at all these cards as we went through didn't notice, one of the cool interactions you can do with this deck that I like, I've mentioned that you want to keep clocking the Ozymandias 2-1 to get the alarm effect as often as possible. Well, if you have the Ozymandias Clock Encore backstage, which lets you filter out the treasures for a card in your clock whenever you trigger one, you can clock the Ozymandias, go into Climax phase, get a stock, and then attack, trigger a treasure, ditch the treasure to pick the Ozymandias back up out of your clock so that you can clock it again next turn to get more stock. So really, cutting an Ozymandias 2-1 could be an option, because once you get 1, it's pretty possible just to loop that 1 for a couple turns, even. But yep, let me know what you think of this list. Let me know any changes that you would make in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that. If you've played this deck, let me know how it was. If you have other deck ideas that you would like me to do videos on, hit me up with those. And thank you for watching. You can find me at BoatsDon'tSink on Twitter. You can find the store at Iron City Games on Facebook or ironcitygames.tcgplayerpro.com, where you can get singles from Fate Grand Order if you want to try building this deck for yourself. And I will see you all next time.